Hello everyone, welcome to another Eternal Brews video series here on my channel. Today I'm going to talk about the Argenport Aggro brew that has made some waves in the last couple days. This deck is basically a co-production of Top Masters League player Calimdir and myself. He basically got inspired to try and brew a deck around Crownwatch, Cavalry, Tinker Apprentice and Dark Return and the synergies between the three cards from my Rakano list that played 2 Crownwatch Cavalry, which is basically the first competitive deck that I know of that made use of Cavalry and therefore drew some attention on it. And yeah, he basically mentioned the idea of wanting to brew a deck centered around these 3 cards, and I immediately had an idea in my head like what direction I would want to take this, and that the idea actually has potential. And I brewed my own version. He showed me his first approach and we both basically went in the same direction and kind of like talked about it from there and fine-tuned it. His current version is slightly different than mine. Another thing that definitely is his idea was adding Cabal Countess, a card that I missed while brewing, and he added a while down the road when playing the deck. And while I haven't played much with the Countess yet, just in theory the card seems like a great fit for the deck. The deck has a bit of a lack of 3-drops, since before there was only Valkyrie Enforcer, so Countess fits perfectly in the curve and also has nice synergy with the deck. Like, it benefits greatly from the pump effects with its quick draw ability, and also the ultimate has nice synergy with Dark Return, allowing you to ultimate her again, even though the ultimate is not that great because the second time the quick draw does nothing. So basically you just pay for power to get another +2, but that's still better than a unit that doesn't get any benefits from being recursed. So yeah, let's talk about my deck list and why I play the cards and the numbers of the cards that I'm playing as usual, and then I'll show the deck in some games, since there has been a rising interest in the deck because it's kind of fun, fairly competitive, and something different from what you see every day. So people like a little change here and there. So first of all, we have 8 1-drops, 4 Tinker Apprentice and 4 Blood Beetle. The other options would be the 1/1 Empower in green and Knife Jack in purple or black, depending on what you want to call it. Me as a Magic player tend to refer to it as black because it's basically the same attributes, same things that the color does as black and Magic, and also is the closest to black in terms of the colors that exist in the game. And yeah, Beetle is just better. It has more synergy with Dark Return. The flying is great with all the pump, giving you another evasion attacker, and between combat tricks and shape removal, we are reasonably well set up at enabling the infiltrate, at least if we play this on turn 1 or 2. And yeah, Knife Jack, the 2 damage can hurt you quite a bit. This deck is not like as aggressive as Jido, where the 2 life barely ever matter, so it's more important here. And yeah, the flying and the recursive infiltrate with Dark Return are a bit more appealing for what the deck is trying to do. And yeah, Tinker Apprentice is one of the synergy cards that is also nice to recur with Dark Return, makes your cavalry a lot better and also makes the 2-drops a lot stronger. Plus there's only limited options in terms of 1-drops, like the 1/1 Empower gets bad pretty quickly. The deck doesn't run a million power drops, so usually you get like 2 triggers out of it or whatever, and then it's a 1/1 that sits around and doesn't do anything anymore. That is more a card for like either hyper aggressive decks that end the game quickly, or decks that are aggressive enough to want it, but still have enough ways to get the power drops to consistently have it be a 3-3. That's kind of generally a problem with that card. On the one hand, you want consistent power drops for it to maintain being a 3-3 for 1, while you also only want it in an aggressive deck because it's bad at blocking and it's an aggressive 1-drop that doesn't make much sense in any other strategy. So it's kind of good and bad at the same time in every archetype, because usually most archetypes can only provide either the power drops or the aggressiveness, not both at the same time. Has been similar cards in Magic that have the same problem basically. There's a 1/1 for 1 that gets +1/+1 until end of turn from Empower, and there's ways to get, like with fetch lands, to get double Empower in one turn, basically making it about the same card as the Recruiter. I think Recruiter is the name. So yeah, and that card basically only was fairly unplayable outside of one specific aggro deck that ran a rare amount, a really high amount of lands, like 25 or something, because it was built around Empower. Basically it was like an Empower landfall aggro deck that had a combo kill. But yeah, normally these cards are kind of torn between wanting to be in an aggro deck and wanting to be in a deck with a lot of power drops, making them bad in both. Next up we have the cheap spells. I'm fairly convinced for Suffocate is right. This is basically the color combinations Torch, while unlike Torch it can't go to the face, which definitely is a downside. It also has some nice upsides. It can kill a lot more things than Torch. It can, especially against Combray, it can kill Seraph, it can kill Combray Healer. Also against Feln it can kill Harbinger, it can kill Witch, it can kill Bloodcaster, it can basically kill most of the Feln units and the good defensive Combray units, which Torch all can't touch, and a couple others. So this is a pretty efficient and versatile spell. Unlike Torch, it's a spell, not a fast spell, which makes it a little less flexible in timing, but since we mostly care about removing blockers, it's not that big of a deal. A lot of the time it's fine to just kill the unit on our turn before attacking. Sometimes that makes us waste the power that we might have left at the end of turn, where we could already preemptively kill the blocker before we go to our turn and can't, but that's just how it is. There's only one Torch in one faction in this game, so we gotta make do with what we have. But Suffocate is a really good filler for the purpose that Torch usually takes in red versions. Next off we have 4 combo tricks, which is kind of like the normal number you see in these types of decks. I considered 5 or 6 at some point, but first of all there's the risk of getting flooded with those in matchups where they are not good, like against a lot of removal and not many blockers, and also there's only so much space. I decided to go for 2-2 split, because both have their up and down sides. Rapid Shot is better offensively and takes down bigger blockers, and also avoids potential trades thanks to Quick Draw, while Finest Hour can protect against cards like Torch, Lightning Storm, and stuff like that, which is also a bonus. So I think they are similar enough that a split gives us flexibility in regard to their different upsides, while they most of the time are interchangeable in like 80% of the situations or something. That's like a very common principle in advanced deck building, that if you have multiple cards that are very similar in what they do and what role they fulfill, but have different strengths and weaknesses, that if both strengths are relevant, you can split them without actually playing like we're not playing 2 combat tricks, we're still playing 4 combat tricks. We just play 4 combat tricks split into 2 different types of combat tricks that most of the time do the same thing for us. But sometimes one can do more for us than the other. So that's it for the 1 power cards. Oh yeah, right, Dark Return. Currently I'm only on 3 Dark Return. I'm still a bit on the fence between 3 and 4. But first of all, there's space issues. Second of all, this card is like a bit lackluster if you draw too many too early, because for the first couple of turns you neither want to cast this most of the time, nor can you actually, because you probably don't have a good target yet, and it might just like throw off your curve or something. And multiples can sometimes just rot in your hand in matchups where they don't kill your units that much, and games go a different way. I had 4 in the beginning, and in the first couple of games I drew a bunch of those and they were kind of awkward and sitting in my hand and a bit underwhelming, so I figured 3 is the safe number, but it's possible that the 4s still should be in there, because the card can be potentially very powerful on cards like Countess, Enforcer, and especially on Cavalry. Or even on like a Ranger that already had his Infiltrate trigger and stuff. So the card has a lot of nice synergies, but is a bit situational. So yeah, I wouldn't fault anyone for running 4 right now, because I'm not 100% sure that 4 is wrong. Next we have the 2 power removal split of to Annihilate to Vanquish. Normally Rakano, for example, usually can only afford to run 3 because they only have access to Vanquish, and Vanquish is too limited most of the time to run 4, because there's some decks where it doesn't do much or even anything sometimes. While we have access to Annihilate and Vanquish, which mostly cover the same units, but have different upsides. Once again, just like with the Finest Hour Rapid Shot split, since Annihilate and Vanquish both kill like most of the 4+ power units like Impending Doom, Titan, Reaper, Drake, stuff like that. While Vanquish, for example, is one of the few cards that can kill an enhanced Champion of Chaos, and Annihilate can just kill so many more units than Vanquish in general. So this is more flexible, and this is more effective basically. Like this kills more units that are really bothersome, and this just rots in our hand a lot less often and is a fast spell, which gives us a lot more flexibility in combat and to react in the opponent's turn, and also is less likely to have no targets in play. Which is why a 2-2 split is pretty good. Like 2 Vanquish and Rakano would be too few, but the third is kind of more a necessary evil that sometimes backfires, while here we have the luxury of only having to run 2 because we can cover some of the roles that the third Vanquish would with the 2 Annihilates that we added. So there's like a nice key overlap once again. Most of the time they will kill something that the other version would also kill, would and could, and sometimes there will be situations where one would sit in our hand doing nothing while the other can do the job. Like if we are facing a Champion of Chaos, if we would play for Annihilate, we would feel a bit stupid, and if we have one of our 2 Vanquishes instead of one of the 2 Annihilates, we can actually deal with the champion. And if we are facing all 3 or less attack units, will be happy that we have Annihilate over Vanquish 3 and 4 in our hand, so we can actually trade it for an opposing card. Then we have the 2-drop units for Argenport Instigator. Finally, Argenport Instigator gets to actually go into an Argenport deck, which is nice. It's also one of the best 2-drops in the game and the best 2-drop in our combination. 2 power 3/3, good ability, great aggressive unit, not much we have to say here. It's basically our champion of glory here, with different upsides and better against silence and more consistent basically. Next we have Crownwatch Paladin, basically a staple in green aggro decks. Just great Warcry, Aegis, good target for our pump effects thanks to Aegis. Warcry makes our pump effects better, like the Warcry trigger hit Cavalry, that's perfect, and so on and so forth. And last but not least, the third best 2-drop in our color combination, Lethrai Ranger. A bit weak before he gets his infiltrate trigger off, but we have combat tricks and removal to help him get there, and once he manages to, he quickly becomes the potentially best 2-drop in our deck at 4/4 for 2, and nice synergy with Dark Return as well to get him from 4/4 to 7/7. Dark Return making it a 5/5, and then another infiltrate making it a 7/7, turning it into a huge monster for little power cost. And yeah, not much else to say on the 2-drops here. Next we have the 3-drops, 2 Cabal Countess, like I already mentioned earlier. Nice addition for the deck, lets you set up turn 4 pump plays, play around sweepers, just a good aggressive 4-drop in the color combination we are playing. Could easily be that the deck wants a third one, for example. It's all a matter of space available basically. And Valkyrie Enforcer, another clear 4-off in a justice-based aggro deck basically. 3 power, 3/3 flying is already great stats, and if we get a free silence on top of it, that's even better. Answers a bunch of problematic things, while also being a great attacker. And we can even rebuy them with Dark Return if we need another silence or flyer. So nice utility added to our Dark Return as well. And last but not least, we have our 7 turn 4 power plays. Basically the same thing that makes Rakano so powerful. Turn 4 Hammer of Might is a huge game swing. So is basically a Crownwatch Cavalry that's like 3/3 or bigger. And we have 7 of those, and we have ways to make sure Cavalry is like at least a 3/3 usually, thanks to Tinker Apprentice and to some Warcry. So Cavalry is a bit weaker than Hammer, and sometimes we get Cavalry in our opening hand and it's only a 2/2, or we have no way to enhance it before we draw or play it. Then it's just a 2/2, so it's not always a powerhouse, sometimes it's just a solid card, and getting Cavalry flooded and drawing them too often and too early can be lackluster, which is why I shaved down to 3, since the prime 4-drop still is Hammer, and this is like Hammer 5 to 7 basically. And yeah, if you ever have like 2 Cavalries in your opening hand, you kind of quickly want to go down to 3, since that can be pretty awkward. And 3 is still enough to usually get 1 eventually for the synergies between like Dark Return and Tinker Apprentice and other stuff. Like you can even play it and throw it away to just rebuy it and make the unit it grew the first time even bigger and stuff like that. So that's it for the cards. Power base is fairly straightforward once again. As usual, I'm running a reasonably high amount of power, currently on 27. It is possible that it should be 28. I went with 27 and 2 monuments this time because we have 0/5 power cards compared to the Rakano deck. So I figured we probably can get away with 27. I'm currently on 1 of each monument, just because the lifesteal actually has some good synergy with all the pump. There's a nice way to swing games. I wouldn't fault anyone for disliking the Puma and just running a another gem blade instead. But I just think the split gives you a bit more flexibility, and it's also better for the color requirements because we have 1-drops in both colors, so we kind of want to split our depleted lands between both colors, so we are reasonably equally likely to play our 1-drops on turn 1, no matter which one we have. And yeah, the rest is just the 12 duels as usual. As I often already said, there's not that many decks that shouldn't be running 4 diplomatic seals. Decks that shouldn't run 4 seals a lot of the time are decks that run Champion of Chaos or bigger champions like Wisdom or Cunning because of their influence requirements, and also a lot of tri-faction decks because they often rely on like 12 seeds and seek power, so you want to maximize the amount of sigils you can run outside of the seeks and seeds, so your seeds are as good as possible basically. And also the color requirements in tri-faction decks can be hurt by late game top deck diplomatic seals when you like need one more influence of one of your factions, and instead of a power that gives you one of your influences, potentially you draw a power that gives you no influence and makes your mana worse, like your influence worse. But normally in most decks, especially in 2-color decks and proactive lower curve or at least lower requirement decks, diplomatic seal greatly adds to the consistency of your influence base and your opening hands, and also your early game influence flexibility. Like, this gives us a lot of flexibility in whether we want double shadow or double justice on 3, for example, because depending on which one of those two we have, we can use this either for shadow or for justice to help fix our double cost 3-drops, for example. I still don't get why people underrate this card so much still, but yeah, I mean, I think it'll establish eventually, and there's still too many decks out there that should run seal in my opinion, and only benefit from running it that don't, while they basically wouldn't be hurt by running seal at all. And influence color consistency is so important in these games because that's one of the big ways to lose games before they started, if you cannot play your stuff because you don't have all the colors you need. So every card that makes your opening hands more consistent at playing your cards and makes your hands more keepable is welcome. That's, in my opinion, a very important lesson in deck building. Get all the consistency adding cards that you can in your deck, especially if it's not hurting your deck. And yeah, so far no deck that I thought this card belonged into and I put it into and played the deck, I've ever like regretted having put it in or felt like it hurt the deck in any way. Every time I thought it belongs, put it in, tried it. It also like showed that it belonged and made the deck more consistent without hurting it. So aggressively try putting seal in your deck and basically only cut it when the criteria that I mentioned earlier apply, and or you frequently find yourself being at a disadvantage due to having seal in your deck rather than it being either irrelevant or beneficial to your influence base. Alright, I think that's all I can say about the deck right now. Calimdir and I jokingly called it not quite Rakano when we talked about it, because it basically is mostly what Rakano is and has a similar game plan to Rakano, with some differences, like it has a bit better late game grind potential and a bit stronger answers in terms of removal than Rakano does, but it also has less punch, less power than Rakano, less snowball potential due to less Warcry and weaker 1-drops, for example, and no blade. So yeah, while it's not quite Rakano, it's still a solid aggro deck and a nice cheap alternative to Rakano for people that like aggro decks and looking for something a little different that is still reasonably competitive. Alright, see you in a moment with the first half of the games. Stay tuned.